podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
No brakes. No brakes. No fear. No fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome along. I'm Ian Brannan, and this week we're focusing on two things in particular: the Speedway of Nations and the British Final. First of all, the British Final was not without its incidents, particularly the rain arriving, meaning things were curtailed at Heat 12 and decisions needing to be made on what happened next. Rob Godfrey, the chairman of British Speedway Promoters Limited, is with us in this episode to explain what was happening in those meetings that took quite a while to work out exactly what was going to happen next, and we'll talk about those decisions and the thinking behind them. Also with us this week, I'm very pleased to say, we've also got Mark Lemon, the team manager who took Australia to the Speedway of Nations title last weekend, making Australia world champions for the first time in 20 years. Mark Lemon, also the CEO and team manager of the Belle Aces in the British Speedway Premiership, of course, as well. So we'll talk all about that and how his week has gone with winning that silverware, and why the novelty really is not going to wear off for quite some time. And we'll have a look ahead to the fixtures for the week ahead and beyond as well. All on the way on this week's episode of No Brakes, No Fear.
No brakes, no fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome along to No Brakes, No Fear. Lots to get through. Not too many actual rider interviews this week, because with the Speedway of Nations last week and the British Final on Monday, we don't have too many interviews with riders, but we do have a couple of guests, so I hope we'll provide lots of insight into both of those events, though, because later on we'll have Mark Lemon, team manager of the victorious, now world champions, the Australian team, in part two. And first of all, we're going to speak with Rob Godfrey, the chairman of the British Speedway Promoters Limited, after the British Final on Monday night, which you may well have watched. It was an event that provided some terrific racing in the opening salvos of the British Final at the National Speedway Stadium. We got up to Heat 12. We ended up with 3 riders on 8 points. Dan Bewley, Tom Brennan and Chris Harris were all locked on 8 points, but the riders hadn't actually ridden each other equally, so it was very hard to call a fair result, and therefore there was a discussion about how best to resolve the British Final. Of course, a lot riding on this, not least the wild card for Cardiff, but of course the prestige of being the British champion and how best to resolve that in 2022. So, joining us right now is Rob Godfrey, chairman of British Speedway Promoters Limited, and thanks for joining us, Rob, on what I'm sure is a very busy day. You were in that briefing room with the riders. Take us back to Monday night and just explain to us the conversations that were being had behind closed doors, the options on the table for resolving this meeting fairly in the interests of all the riders, because, of course, different riders got different interests in that meeting at different points, and how it was decided to best resolve this situation.
Yeah, obviously I was alerted to a problem by Damien that was actually in the pits. The rain started to fall around about Heat 8. At that point it was really light. From where we were sat, we weren't really aware of the rain getting harder as such. Obviously, there's a natural break after Heat 12 because the riders have got 2 on the trot. And at that point, the SCB, who are in charge of the meeting, is really nothing to do with the BSPL as such, called a halt to proceedings. They then took the riders into a briefing room and explained to them how potentially a winner would be selected. But they had a really big problem because there was 3 riders on 8 points, and there was no clear-cut way of splitting them. They hadn't met each other once, etc., etc. At this point, several of the riders wanted to continue because they still had a chance of being British champion as such. The meeting ensued, the meeting went on, and then I was asked to intervene because the riders were not happy with the SCB's suggestion on how maybe they decided a British champion. So myself and Damien went into the room And it was very, very clear that the large majority of them, or the very large majority of them, wanted the meeting not to be called. They would have, in normal circumstances, they would have, if the rain had stopped, they would have carried on. But in any effect, they wanted to restage the meeting. They did not want it to end this way. So a conversation was had and votes were cast, and it was decided that the meeting would be null and void, and we would rerun the British final with the majority of the riders' wishes. So then the wild card, because that meeting produces the wild card for Cardiff, it always had. And once again, it was put to the riders that if this meeting is called and there is no conclusion to it, then naturally that Adam Ellis is the British champion and would be the wild card. And it was majoritarily accepted that by the riders that Adam would be the wild card. So it was quite amicable. I'm not saying all the riders agreed to it. There was a minority that didn't, but the large majority were very, very happy that we decided we'd taken it out of the SCB hands and to rerun the meeting because they were not happy the way it was concluded. So we felt that, as I say, not everyone is happy with the decision, obviously, but the very large majority of them were.
You touched on the SCB in and among that. Of course, they're the organisation that look after the referees. They're also look after the framework of the sport, the rules and regulations and so on. You are the chairman of the BSPL. A lot of questions land at your door. But just explain the difference between the two organisations, really, and who's responsible for what in respect to the British final.
Well, it is a BSPA shared event. Let's be clear about it. A BSPL shared event, and the SCB officiated. But in this case, there was no clear rules on how we got to a winner because it only got to hit 12. Not everyone had met everyone else. There was nothing clear cut. It was going to be decided on race times. Well, race times have never been included on how you choose a champion. So this is what infuriated the riders that were probably not at the top of the pile, which I understand. And we felt it was unfair. We just, me and Damien felt it was absolutely unfair and could see everyone's point of view here. And the only logical thing to do was to rerun the meeting and not to conclude it, and to have a British champion on that night and to let a meeting run for the full races that it should, and to restage it. So, and that's, with consultation with the riders, that's what the result that we came to. It wasn't fair that things were being made up as such, not made up, but trying to figure out a way of having a champion to actually get a champion. We felt the fairest way was to let everyone race for it on another day.
Do you think that as a result, and of course it was always possible that rain was going to affect that meeting at some point, but do you think that the rules might be revisited for either the next running of this or in the closed season at the AGM to try and avoid a similar situation in the future?
I think that with hindsight is a wonderful thing. We felt that we weren't going to get the rain till 9 o'clock, and we probably could have got to a conclusion. That's why we were 2 minutes to try and get it to a conclusion. A lot of hindsight, a lot of, the rain may not have come. But it did, and it actually came earlier than we predicted it would. The fairest way next time is that if there's any rain forecast and it's got a bit of substance to it, then the meeting will be not staged at all until it's a clear night and we're guaranteed of getting to a conclusion. These things do happen in World Championships events. I don't remember them happening in the British final previously. As I say, if we got to the point where every rider had met every rider, it would have been a lot easier to say he's champion, he beat him, fair and square, this is the result. But we didn't get to that point. And as I say, to chuck in race times, we felt as much as the majority of the riders did, it was a bit unfair. It was a lot unfair.
It's hard for there to be winners out of this situation, I think. Maybe some fans will be saying, well, why wasn't there a runoff, or why are we not going to have a runoff for the Cardiff wildcard spot between now and when the event takes place? Clearly very difficult to organise that. But first and foremost, this is the British Championship, isn't it? This is not a race-off for Cardiff for the wild card spot. It is the British Championship first and foremost. Historically, the Cardiff wild card has gone to the winner or the best place to beyond someone who's already qualified. But ultimately, this is about the British Championship rather than a Cardiff wild card.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? You're absolutely correct, because the prestige is winning the British final, not being the Cardiff wild card. That is the carrot on the stick, basically. It's and to the other riders, they know restaging this that they're not going to get to Cardiff. By time Heat 12 had come, the track was done. The rain was falling extremely heavy. There was no chance of a rerun. How do you factor in getting two riders to have a rerun on a neutral track? They'll always favour somebody. It's and yes, Bellevue maybe favoured Brennan and such. But it's really, like you said, it is about being British champion. And we listen to the riders, and that every single one of them wants to be British champion, but they want to be given the opportunity to race for it, not to be called off at Heat after they've done 3 rides, so after Heat 12. So that's what we've done.
And with the restaging of this event, obviously some point later in the year, do we know roughly when this might be, and do we know where it will be? Will it be back at Bellevue again?
Yeah, absolutely. We intend at this point to run it at Bellevue. Absolutely. That is our first choice. We've had offers from other tracks, but Bellevue is our first choice. Everyone came to Bellevue on that night. Everyone, I'm sure, will come back to Bellevue to see the restaging. The riders want it at Bellevue. I think everybody wants it at Bellevue. There's no question about that. When it will be, we are hoping that it will be sometime in September, not necessarily on a Monday night. But it will be where it's accessible to all, and it will be where there will be a good weather forecast, and we'll guarantee getting through the programme. We'll not take a chance like this again. That's pretty much discussions that we've had this morning. As I say, there is winners and there's losers in this, but it's unfortunate the guys that were on 8 points, and you've got to feel for the ones that are on 7, had 2 more rides to catch them as well. You can look at every permutation. There is, as I say, well, winners and losers. There's probably no winners in this one. Probably people will single out Adam Ellis as a winner for it, but he did do the hard work last year, and he didn't have the opportunity to go to Cardiff. So, and he is still the current British champion, because the riders agreed last night that meeting would be called with no result. They agreed, that majority. So that was their choice again. So had we called it and there'd been a decision, there would have been a new British champion. The majority did not want it calling last night. So we've listened to the riders, we've listened to what they want, and I've got to say there is a minority that were against it. I've got to say that. Obviously the ones that it probably benefited, but the majority, large majority of them, wanted it rerunning. And we've listened to that. The SCB were not comfortable on giving the result as it was, as they could only find a way of giving it. So we took it out of their hands. We, negotiate with the riders, and we're back on with another British final later date that hopefully will be at Bellevue. Was
there no rule already there for such an eventuality? Because I think you got this 12 heat thing whereby it's called, but obviously that's not taking into account that everybody hasn't raced each other. Is this the first time that this has happened? A lot of people be confused perhaps why there wasn't a rule, why 12 would be the marker if that's the point where the riders haven't all faced each other realistically. You can call a meeting at 12. Yeah, you can call a meeting at 12. There's no question about that. And there was discussions that if we got to 12, we could call it. But there was no way
of splitting the riders. That was the problem. There was a suggestion that we use our averages to split the riders, but Dan Bewley hasn't got an average. There was, and then the SCB came up with the idea of race times, and that's where confusion and everything sets in because of race times. You know, I could have gone quicker than him if I'd known about it beforehand. If there was no, if the SCB had been up front and there'd been a supplementary regulation to say the fastest race time will win this, that, and the other, then the riders would not have protested as much. I wouldn't have thought, because it would have been clear and precise. I assumed that in the eventuality they'd gone to 12, had there been 1 on 9, 1 on 8, 1 on 7, then yesterday's result would have stood. But because 3 of them were on 8, and there was no way to split them, this is why it all happened, and everyone really wants to rerun it.
And obviously,
it was tight at the top.
It was very tight
at the top. Yeah, you know, down to 6th, 7th place could still have won that meeting.
And for those riders that weren't perhaps on board with this way of sorting things out, because you said that not everybody was, and said 75% or so were quite unanimous with it. But what have you said to those, and how do you appease those riders, I guess, who maybe are a bit perhaps put out that they didn't get their chance when they felt that it was within their grasp? Well,
it was it was a vote that the riders took. It was a vote that they all took. The majority won. It's a democratic vote as such, and the majority of them wanted to rerun it. So, like in everything that we all do, we don't always agree with votes, but you have to go along with the majority, and the majority of them wanted to do it. Let's be clear: this was riders, and this was me and Damien figuring out a solution to the problem. We want the riders to be happy. We want everyone to be happy, but we can't please everyone. We tried to please everyone. Don't get me wrong, we feel for them. 1 or 2 that aren't happy at what happened yesterday, but it was a democratic vote to restage it. And I think for the fans want to see everyone take the rides. They want to see a true British champion over 4 or 5 rides. I think you take 5 rides, don't they? So, and then a semi and a final. They want to see it. We all want to see it. So it's a great event. Every year, it never fails to be a great event. The best of British does bring out the best in the British riders.
Just explain the jigsaw puzzle, because scrapping a night's meetings obviously has a big knock-on effects elsewhere, I guess.
Yeah, as it stands, the Premiership is pretty much full up to the end of the season to their playoffs. They're struggling to get fixtures in a League of Six. It's quite it's very hard. So it was a non-starter putting a fixture back. I mean, when we originally looked at it, we looked at putting it back, taking Ipswich, Belle off next week, but then Kings Lynn and Sheffield are running. So you've got conflicts there straight away. It's just virtually impossible to factor it in within the next few weeks. Certainly if you want it back at Bellevue, and certainly the riders want it back at Bellevue, and I think the fans want it back at Bellevue. It just produced some spectacular racing, and it is a National Speedway Stadium. So no, it's just a virtually impossibility. Conversations this morning that it potentially, I don't know a word, it potentially will be on a Sunday going forward for the restaging, which will allow a lot more people to attend on a day where suits a lot of more people than a Monday night. So, yeah, it was just not an option to get it back in ASAP, just not an option. You've got Dan Bewley's commitments that now we've got to look at. Monday night was quite easy for him. If we run it on a Sunday, we've got Poland commitments, etc., etc. So we now have to talk to Poland to make sure we don't cross over with Dan Bewley's commitments, to make sure we can get him back, and he's got a chance of being British champion, or at least have a go at it. So a lot of things to to look at. It is not straightforward, absolutely not straightforward. Certainly not with the Premiership. We're in on a Monday and Thursday.
A couple of other things just to mention while you're on. Of course, the next big major event will be the Championship Pairs the night before Cardiff, which is always a big event. New location at Oxford, replacing Somerset, which we sadly lost last year, of course, and it was always a part of a lot of people's Cardiff weekend. But Oxford, I think, equally on the way for many people as well. So hoping for a big evening there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's great to have Oxford back into any league. It's a great stadium, and they've done a fantastic job in renovating it. It's still work in progress, but what an amazing job they've done so far. It is on the way to Cardiff. It's an hour and a half. It's probably the nearest track to Cardiff that we've got now. And for anybody that hasn't been to Oxford, I'm sure that and thinking to go to Cardiff, they'll drop in on the way. Tickets went on sale last week. We've sold half the allocation already, another half to go. So anybody that is thinking about it, don't delay it. It will be ticket only. It is a great racetrack. You know, they've built a good racetrack there. They've modified the old racetrack. So it's going to be exciting. Everyone's in the championships had a ride there, so they know what to expect. There's some great pairings in there. And I do believe it certainly won't be home track advantage. It's anyone's for the taking.
Yeah, it's a great racetrack, as you say, but also a great stadium too. And I think if you've not been to Oxford, even if you've been to Oxford years ago, it has changed a bit. But great access with the pits as well down the back straight. People can get a good view of all what's going on as well now, and lots of places to eat and drink. And yeah, I think you'll have a great time. Different experience to Somerset, that's got to be said, but a positive one in that way.
Yeah. It's a shame Somerset's not there. I mean, it was traditionally you go to Somerset and then you go to Cardiff. It's an absolute crying shame that one's gone. But equally, we're blessed that Oxford has come back. And
an update on Zane Kennedy. Many people will have seen his quite spectacular crash last week. He is injured, but thankfully he's under control, I suppose. His injuries could have been a whole lot worse on Friday night last week, and best wishes to him. We've heard from him in hospital and he's still recovering, but just an update from you on that, because it was a spectacular crash, and thankfully I think in many ways the spectacular nature perhaps prevented more serious injury, maybe you'd say.
Yeah, I think it ranks up in the top 5 crashes that I've ever seen in Speedway and never want to see again. It was, you can replay in slow motion where the bike picked up coming out the corner, but unfortunately it was veering off to the right. And obviously Zane ended up over the fence. But thankfully, when we got to Zane, he was still conscious and everything. There was glimmer of hope. There was the doctor that jumped over the fence that actually was the air ambulance doctor, which was just a bizarre story, really, that enabled the air ambulance to come. But talking to Sam Malenko, Zane stops with, he believes Zane's going to be back between 3 and 4 weeks. Wow. Which was quite bizarre. He's got a little operation to come. A little bit of bone on his pelvis is detached, and they're going through keyhole surgery to reattach that with a little screw. But the others are just breaks, breaking his finger and breaking his toe, and this bit that's chipped off his pelvis. So lucky lad. I wish I'd got the lottery numbers off him for Saturday night, because I think we might have had a result. Certainly I've ever seen. And so pleased for him. So pleased that it's and it hasn't dampened his enthusiasm either. So that's also great. So yeah, great positive news on that.
And are any further towards knowing what happened to cause the bike to take off like that? Was it a throttle issue? Was there a fault with the bike, or was it just one of those where he just hit a bit of grip and off he went?
No, we're not clear. You would assume it was a throttle issue. The way that the bike just continued. But just thankful that Zane's here to talk, but we haven't really got round to talking about that yet. I'm sure that once he's back home, we'll establish what actually happened, and he'll look at the bike and be able to make judgment himself on what happened. But once again, very, very thankful that his injuries are very minor.
Well, we're all very thankful for that, and great to see that and hear that he'll be potentially back on a bike a lot sooner than many of us perhaps thought he would do. But it just shows that padding that the guys wear as well underneath their Kevlars is certainly worth the investment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was quite funny on the night. He's now obviously I always do complain about with his big toe. He's ripped his toenail off. So, and obviously we had to cut his Kevlars off, which he was not happy about. So we'll have to buy him a new set of Kevlars.
I'm sure, if nothing else, a bit of a crowd fund will help out on that one for sure. Rob, thanks for joining us today on No Brakes, No Fear. Just before we go, just a word about next week's big event. Of course, the Grand Prix in Cardiff. We now know Adam Ellis will be in that lineup, but for the first time, we've got 4 British riders in a British Grand Prix final. As far as I know, that's the first time that's happened, and the stage is set for a wonderful atmosphere and a wonderful occasion.
You know, I feel for Tom Brennan. I really do feel for Tom, because Tom's really at the top of his game at the minute, and he is first reserve. I do hope he gets an opportunity in that, because I think he could win some races in that as well, and put the cat among the pigeons. It's going to be a great event, and you're not going to bet on not a British rider not winning it this year, are you? I mean, the last time I saw a British rider winning it, I don't think Ty's won it at Cardiff, has he?
Only Chris Harris has won it.
That's right. Yeah, well, I was there that night when Chris Harris won it. It was amazing. It was amazing. Never forget it. Absolutely brilliant. And it's a shame Chris isn't there this year, but it is what it is, isn't it?
And so the track reserves then, are they confirmed as well now as a result? I mean, you mentioned there Tom,
and it's Leon Flint.
Well, it's a great experience for those guys. I mean, and Tom's going to be racing in SGP2 definitely anyway, isn't he, on the Sunday? Yes, he is. So it's a big weekend for Tom. Absolutely big weekend. Don't count Tom out for the SGP2 because he could win it. Absolutely, the form is in at the minute. It'll be a big afternoon for Tom, and a big weekend for everyone involved with British Speedway. Thanks a lot for joining us, Rob. Really appreciate your time, and here's to a successful rerun when we get there. Oh, we'll get there. Definitely going to get there, and it'll be a great event, and hopefully everyone will have forgot last night and look. The restaging will be more successful than we ever imagined. Listen, it's been difficult for me. It's always difficult for me, and it's difficult for the board. But I do think we did the right thing last night. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was, I think, the right decision, and we got the respect of the riders afterwards, by doing what we've done. So hopefully the public can come to terms with it, the ones that don't agree with it, and support us next time we come back. My thanks to Rob Godfrey, Chairman of British Speedway Promoters Limited, for joining us on this week's episode of No Brakes, No Fear. And we'll keep a connection with the National Speedway Stadium in the next part, because we're going to be joined by the Australian team boss and, of course, the boss of the Bellevue Aces, Mark Lemon, in the next part, reflecting on the big win for Australia in the Speedway of Nations, ending 20 years chasing that team trophy and finally lifting it at the weekend. So we'll hear all about that, and we'll talk about the Aces and much more besides in the next part of No Brakes, No Fear.
No Brakes, No Fear, the official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome back. I'm Ian Brannan. Well, last week on this podcast, we had Ollie Allen, the Great Britain joint team manager, previewing the Speedway of Nations. The Speedway of Nations is, of course, now completed, and it was the end of an epic 4 days, 90 heats of racing, and the first Speedway of Nations of the new era for FIM Speedway under Discovery Sports Events. And it was Australia who topped the podium ahead of runners-up Great Britain and third place Sweden. Mark Lemon taking the decision to make Speedway GP duo Jack Holder and Max Frick his starting leading pair throughout the final, the duo repaying him spectacularly, with Holder piling in 19 points, Max Frick with 11 as they totalled 30 points on the night. And in the end, it was a race-off against Great Britain to decide it, and the rest of the say is all history. It was Australia who raised the trophy aloft for the first time in 20 years. Mark Lemon, Team Australia team manager, is with us, and of course also CEO and team manager at the Bellevue Aces as well. And Mark, you've ended that 20-year wait. You've finally done it. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's kind of pretty hard to believe, and it feels a bit surreal at the moment. And when you're those welcoming notes to hear that World Championship being mentioned. But yeah, it's been, I think it's been long overdue. We've been knocking on the door, had some near misses, but on Saturday night or last week, just everything seemed to fall in a line, and we couldn't have asked for a better result, really, to lift that crown. And after so long, some raw emotions came out, and it was just a delight for the boys. They've been trying for so long, and you don't believe it's going to happen, when it's been taking so long. But it was great result.
I think for a lot of people, maybe Australia being many people's sort of second team, if they're from a British persuasion, of course. And you're unique in your lineup that all three of your boys ride in the British League. You're the only team that had an entire lineup that you can see, up and down the country on a Monday or a Thursday night racing.
Yeah, no, interesting. The British presence was definitely felt there. We Aussie boys, and we come over here and as young lads and cut our teeth in the British scene. And certainly, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the most influential and most sort of educational apprenticeships you can serve racing in the UK. And and to be fair, the Nations moved only a few weeks ago from Esbjerg to Voyens, and so my chain of thought actually changed on the process of the team selection, because Esbjerg's a bit more of a round, wider, open circuit, a bit more of a continental track, where Voyens is more, a finer tuned technical track. So thought went into that on the riders that I ended up eventually choosing. So there's very much there was an English presence, and it's nice to hear that the Brits choose us as their second favourite nation. Sometimes I'm not so sure that's so true. We've had some clashes, in test matches and whatnot, but we spend us Aussies spend a lot of time over here in the UK, and call it our second home.
We had Ollie Allen on this podcast last week, and he was saying, similar to you, that actually Voyens of all the tracks is probably the most British style on the continent, and probably would favour the Brits and the Aussies, of course, as well. And that obviously proved to be in the end. And with that kind of, as you say, the track shape really playing into both of our teams' hands, I suppose, Britain and Australia, in terms of the style. Tell us about your team selection, though, because, of course, anybody who put the final on saw Jason Doyle on the sidelines. And just explain to us what the situation was there.
Yeah, well, when I was talking about changing track, I was referring to the squad, as much as the riders that we'd actually take to Voyens that could handle the British conditions. And you mentioned, Ollie said about the shape and the size, but one thing that probably he wasn't aware of at the time, that when the rain came down, that threw a curveball for everyone, and it seemed to see the guys that raced in the UK that's experienced riding in the rain actually sort of come to the forefront, having an all British Australian final. Jason Doyle, he's been captain Australia. He's been leading the team, from the front for such a long time, and there's no prouder guy to represent the Kangaroos than Jason is. So the decision to leave him out in the final was pretty much sort of clear cut. Come after the race off, we went into the race off with a very open mind that no one was actually guaranteed a final berth, and probably on form. Leading up to it, Jason was the actual only Aussie rider really that we could actually nail in to say he was going to be in the team. His form in the Europe was good. His form in the UK has been sensational. Where Jack, Max, probably Brady Kurtz, Sam Masters, Ron Tungate, Chris Holder, a few of them guys weren't quite sort of getting the job done and making my decision very, very difficult to choose. But the selectors and myself, eventually opted for the three Grand Prix riders, and it's just ironic they were three Grand Prix riders, but just felt with their age and sort of their abilities and where they're riding in their careers, they were the right choice. But But on the day, once we come out of that race off, we selected our final two, and I think sometimes you've got to be, give the rider the chance, give them the chance to go and experiment on the track and develop and learn, because obviously at the end of the day it's who wins that final race where it counts. At
what point in the meeting, obviously you're getting down to the final embers of it, but obviously the lead changed hands a few times through the course of the final of the Speedway of Nations. At what point did you have that realisation that actually, this is on here? And especially when you got to the final, the gate choices, a lot of fans were having their say about Great Britain. Did you have a favoured gate? Did you think it sort of fell into your hands at that point?
Yeah, like I said before earlier, sometimes when you win championships and events, that things just fall in place. We had Finland coming up as our last race, and really, you would have thought that would have been a shoe for us to go straight to the final if we clinched a 7-2 there. But Timo Latte was actually flying, and he trapped off gate 2, and we were off to 1 and 3. So therefore, there was a real indicator for me that maybe 1 and 3 wasn't the optimum choice of gates, and it put us into the race off, and probably did us a favour for us, to be quite honest, because we had to come through the race off, and we ended up with 2 and 4, which actually cemented my decision that was the right gates to have. I kept an eye on Ollie and Simon in the GB camp, and I could see a little bit uncertain when they were going through the gate choices. Although I wasn't involved and didn't know what they were thinking, but you could just see there wasn't a confidence there. Where with our team, we just I just come back. If they're 1 and 3, Jack, you're off 4, and Max, you're off 2, and that's done. And then the same thing if we get 1 and 3. Max, you're off 1, and Jack, you're off 3. So we're pretty confident on the pairing, and then the gate choices, it just was going to be what colour. And even to a point where I actually threw a curveball and actually asked them to change helmets to give them a fresh helmet, because it was a hot, sticky night, with the rain and everything about. A little freshen up with a helmet, probably did them wonders.
Certainly did. And then talk us through that final race, because I imagine it was a very long 60 seconds or so after the tapes went up. Your boys hit the front in that first lap, I think it was, and you could really see that Dan Bewley was not making the ground required, and I guess you're just willing them to finish the race, are you?
The moment they dropped that clutch, I knew they had it. Max had found something in his bike that wasn't there earlier on, and Jack was just on fire on the outside. And when they popped out, it was I've never probably felt so nervous in all my life, because you're like, please stay there, please hang on, no engine failures, no chain breaks, no nothing, everything you think that could possibly go wrong, a tyre puncture. It's never over until they've crossed that line. And so I leaked a little bit of emotion and excitement there. There's no doubt about that. But the joy of now and then just bringing it home for that last 60 seconds was pretty hard to take, I must admit, until they crossed that line, because it's Speedway and you never know. But as soon as they popped out that start, I thought, we've got this.
I imagine it takes a bit of time for it actually to sink in that what you have actually achieved. There's obviously the euphoria of winning the meeting, but to become world champions after so long, what's been the messages coming in from back home and all around the Australian team, the Australian supporters far away the other side of the world? Because this would have been in early hours of the morning when you actually won this meeting, or something like that.
Yeah, sure. The Aussies get up religiously and watch the Grand Prix at 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday morning. So I mean, I'm still pinching myself. I'm just looking over my shoulder right now, and I've got the trophy just sat there. And since I've seen it on TV, I've walked around it and seen it in different venues that I never thought it would be in my presence, to be quite honest. But no, we've just had such a great, response from Australia. We spent half the night, to be quite honest. We didn't sleep. Obviously Australia was awake, so they weren't going to let us sleep. We're on FaceTime, and it's fantastic, and catching up with all the past riders and the managers and just the people involved, the sponsors. It was a fantastic night. Sort of paying for it right now still, but the response has been tremendous. I think everyone was sort of overjoyed, because it's been such a long time. We've been there trying, and we've never given up. And we've always like that can-do spirit, and I just think it was, just overdue. And I think a lot of people sort of appreciate the efforts that have gone into winning it. And I'm probably from the British fans, like guys clinched it after 32 years, and you've had some success, and it's always nice to share some, even though probably the Brits probably weren't too keen on it. But it's been a great response, and I've got thousands of messages that I haven't had a chance to go back, and they're still coming in now. So.
and have you and some of those riders, you've been in charge of the Australian national team for 10 years now, as the team manager. There's been many other riders that have helped you on that journey. I'm thinking particularly people like Darcy Ward, Chris Holder. Of course, his brother was involved in that final, but there have been many others that have been part of the setup. Maybe not even riding, but helping in the background, helping out, as part of the group on your way to this moment.
Yeah, there's a long list. There really is, and it's not just the riders. You talk about Chris Holder. Like Chris is, probably you can feel unlucky not to be part of the team because he's had a really good year in the extra league. But the decision to not choose him was not an easy one. Former world champion. It's just as hard to leave him out as it was for Jason on the night. But the change of the guard happens at a time, and you've got to roll with it. But yeah, Darcy Ward, you mentioned Darcy. Darcy, means a lot to us, and he's still very much involved in the thick of things. He's a selector of the team in the squad system. We probably speak more now than we did when he was racing. So he's very much part of the team. But the sponsors, we got CBS Spins in Adelaide. They've been fantastic with us. But when you look closer to the UK, you've got Midlow down in the pool and Roscoe in Swindon. These guys have had great influences in the Australian riders over the years and sort of helped sort of hone our sort of culture and breed our next generation of riders. So we're really grateful for those guys too. So there's been a lot of people that have got us to this point, and hopefully we can build on this now and get further success. But there's a whole bunch of riders that deserve to be classed in this title as world champion, and I've spoken to most of them, and so I said thank you, because they're the boys that have done it.
No, big congratulations. And next year, of course, your team selection might be slightly easier because you get more men to choose from in the Speedway World Cup, which is going to be back. It's going to be at Wroclaw, a track that many riders know very, very well, an exciting track, a nice big track, and you must now be setting your sights on that next major international event in Speedway.
Yeah, definitely. I understand. We're all actually looking forward to the World Cup returning. I must confess, I've been a massive fan of the Speedway World Cup. The pairs of the Speedway Nations is a great event, but it doesn't have that sort of, that bond that brings the 4 or 5 riders from the nation together, for a week. And I think we are, as Aussies, we really sort of, thrive on that when we get together. And we look forward to that competition so much, and we're happy that it's back on the calendar. Can't wait. Wroclaw is a pretty cool town to go and hang out in, and the countdown begins. But there's also on the British front, there's a league title that beckons for Bellevue.
Yes, well, let's talk about Bellevue, because we can't have you on and not mention it. Seems a bit remiss. How's life at Bellevue for you? Because obviously now you are not only the team manager, but in charge of the operations of the club as well. So very much more on the business side. I know that you did have an involvement in that, but obviously Adrian departed, and you're now fully in charge with the reins of the club. And how have things been going on both sides of the fence, shall we say?
Well, track side, they're going very, very well. Obviously, in the beginning of the season, it wasn't going so good because we're holding out to sign Dan Bewley, and with the regulation change, it didn't come about. So that sort of put a lot of pressure on things. And obviously, taking the reins from Adrian, that did a superb job and changed the business model at the club to where it is now. For me to come in and sort of take over, it wasn't something I was expecting. So when I came back from Australia late February, it was like, there you go, off your hop. So it's been challenging. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a natural to the business operation of the stadium. But like in anything in life, I've sort of been a bit of a quick learner, and never been afraid to have a go. So it's been going okay. I think from the outside, I don't think that anyone's really noticed any change. It's been a whole bunch of work, I must confess, and not a lot of sleep, and probably got a few more grey hairs than I probably did 8 months ago. But I think Bellevue as a whole, I think we've got a really good vibe there. We've got some really good people helping in. I think I've learned the word delegate to my best advantage. I can't do everything, but like I said, we've got some really good people involved in the club, and hopefully we can take it to the top on the track, as not only on the track, but as a club and a sustainable business sort of model for that stadium. So we may not have had success as far as the trophy cabinet's concerned, but I think over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I think what we've sort of built there as a culture and a structure at Bellevue is success in itself.
You don't need me to tell you that the league title is a big thing that the fans are looking for. It's been a long time. Is this your best chance yet? You can have good performances, but there seems to be a solidity about Bellevue, right from top to bottom, particularly people like, Tom Brennan, who's come up from the Rising Star and not just made it into the main body of the team, but now seems to be really excelling as well. You seem to have strength right throughout and not relying on just the one rider, which must be a major boost this time round.
Yeah, no, we're travelling good. There's been some really good sort of signage. We brought Max back. Max hasn't had the best season. I think he's going to really ramp it up. Coming towards the end of towards the playoffs and in the playoffs hopefully. Zagar's come back and been a revelation. He's just loving his speed at the moment. He's such a character. He's such a fun guy to have around, and the fans love him. And BK Brady Kurtz, he's kind of been in the club now, well, sort of 3 years, but like sort of 2 on track. But he's sort of really matured as a rider and leading by example and being a real good captain. And obviously Charles, he does his thing. He throws a leg back and he has a go and he wears his heart in his sleeve, and the fans just love that much. But Jai, Reggie Etheridge, he's coming. He's been plugging around. He's got the track pretty dialed in at Bellevue. He's had his confidence sort of dip with a couple of injuries, but I guess the real sort of rising star and the one that's been shining is Tom Brennan. How he's developed and progressed in the last sort of 18 to 24 months has just been outstanding. We've worked really, really hard with him, and this youth program, which is something I really love, to work with the younger riders and be hands on. It's great to see that he's progressing in the sport, and it could be a real trump card for us. And obviously we've got the young German. No one really heard of Norik Baldoon back in March, and he's just been great. We've set him up with his compatriot Robbie Keslar, the former Sheffield sort of Stoke rider, and that's working really well. So like I said, there's just a real good vibe around the club. The riders, the spirit's been fantastic. We have to work on our away form slightly, but I've never had an ACES team that have been so dominant around the National Speedway Stadium. And as you know, to win a league title, it goes on aggregate points. So it probably does put us in a very fortunate position.
Yeah, and obviously the playoffs is where it can really turn around in your favour very, very quickly. It's all about qualifying for those, and then ultimately it's down to a couple of meetings, isn't it, to bring home the title at the end of it. You had the British final, certainly the first staging of it, this week. That's going to be rerun, but to see Dan Bewley blasting round your circuit, and of course Tom Brennan as well, and Charles Wright all having good performances, but to see Dan doing his thing full pelt and really pulling away, that must have been pretty mouth-watering for you to see, and maybe bittersweet, thinking, wow, if only he was doing that in the Premiership this year.
No, great to have Dan back. He was a draw card. The fans love him. Obviously it was a great crowd. And he was putting on a great display. So it was a worthy event to attend. So it's just unfortunately Dan chose Sweden, and then there's league restrictions due to the polish rules and regulations. But hopefully I don't hold out too little that we won't see a return of Dan Bewley to British Speedway. So I know one thing, I'll be doing everything I can to entice him to come back. But it's just great to have him back on these shores. Yeah,
absolutely. It's fantastic to see how well he's doing, I think, in general as well, even from a distance, that he's really kicked on another notch, hasn't he? The other tournament that will be heading your way as well will be the Premiership Pairs, which Bellevue still in and among that. Had a good performance at at Wolves, and then Sheffield next coming up later this month, and then the final round is on your home circuit. So still points to be raced for there.
Yeah, absolutely. It hasn't quite gone our way, the pairs. Ipswich has sort of got a bit of a jump on us. But, we kind of like semi-finaled, second place in the first two and obviously missed out in the final. And same down at Ipswich. It's Kings Lynn was a bit of a, disheartening one for us. But we bounced back at Wolverhampton and probably pretty unlucky. I think Troy Batchelor got the best flyer ever in that race, and that was it, all game over. But we go to Sheffield now, and obviously the home one at Bellevue on the 12th of September. So we really look forward to that one. I think it's going to be a big one. It'll be a great race meeting all the same. So, but that's where if we can win, we need to pick up a couple of wins and then bring it home big at Bellevue, of course, to try and clinch that title. But Ipswich is going to be pretty tough to beat with Jason Doyle in pretty good form.
And on the subject of Ipswich, you're facing them very soon. I think in the next your next fixture on Monday next week, when all 6 teams are in action, and obviously they are currently the pace setters in the Premiership, and led by, as you say, a couple of your old friends in Jason Doyle and Troy Batchelor. They're doing the business for them.
Yeah, Jason will probably come back and haunt me from not putting him into the World Speedway of Nations on the weekend. So he's in, like I said, he's in classic and vintage form, and Troy, like he's finding his feet again from after a few years sort of in the doldrums. But you got Danny King there. It's going to be a cracker of a match. It's a table topper. We expect it to be tough. I know we've had some really good point scoring meetings, but we're not going to get carried out of ourselves. We know there's another job to be done on Monday, and we've got to keep winning those home matches to secure our playoff chances, and pretty much prove the point that where we're at and how strong we are at home, and keep the pressure on.
Yeah, well, all the very best, Mark, for the rest of the season. It's going to come around very, very soon, of course, the playoffs and all the rest of it. But enjoy the moment as well with the big win of the Speedway of Nations. I'm sure you're celebrating for quite some time yet.
Yeah, we'll milk it as long as we can, Ian. So until we get the league trophy.
Good stuff. It could be a very, very busy, couple of months on the party account at Bellevue potentially. Who knows?
Yeah, well, we can certainly put time away for that. I'm sure we're looking for it. It's been a long time. I think it's been 29 years for Bellevue fans, and I get reminded most days. So definitely there'll be a party in Bellevue in Manchester. There's no doubt about that. Okay, well, for your sakes and for all of those of Bellevue, let's hope that does indeed come to pass, and it'll be a big night out later in the season. But thanks for joining us, Mark, and all the very best. No worries.
Mark Lemon, the CEO and team manager of the Bellevue Aces, but of course the team manager of the victorious Speedway of Nations winning Team Australia, who came home with that trophy last weekend, and big congratulations to them. And of course, as we're talking about, next year it'll be the World Cup at Wrocław in Poland, but a lot more about that between now and then, I'm pretty sure. Okay, almost done on No Breaks, No Fear. Join us in a sec. We'll have a recap and look ahead to all the upcoming fixtures over the next 7 days. It is a very, very busy week next week in British Speedway, but we'll look ahead to what this week has in store and the next 7 to 10 days in just a mo, here on No Breaks, No Fear.
No Breaks, No Fear, the official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome back. I'm Ian Brannan, and to round things off, let's just have a look ahead to everything coming up over the next week or more on the fixture list across British Speedway. And Wednesday, we have action in the Championship Jubilee League Southern. It may be all to play for, it may not be by the point that this match gets underway, but Poole Pirates taking on the Oxford Cheetahs in that one. Poole really are in command there. Oxford need to win everything. The Oxford Chargers are in action, meanwhile, at Sandy Lane in the National Development League on Wednesday against the Armadale Devils, who I think are still yet to get a point in the National Development League for them. And then it's Premiership action on Thursday, August 4th. Sheffield Tigers are back in action at Ollerton against the Wolverhampton Wolves, who of course are injury hit with Sam Masters suffering that broken collarbone and a dislocated shoulder as well. It's going to be interesting to see how long Sam's on the sidelines therefore. We do, however, at long last have a new number one for the Kings Lynn Stars. Nikolai Clint will be joining the lineup and has his first taste of action at the Adrian Flux Arena against the Ipswich Witches on Thursday night. Both of those fixtures get underway at 7:30. Looking ahead to Friday, quite a bit of action in the Championship. Edinburgh Monarchs take on the Plymouth Gladiators at Armadale. That's at 7:30. That match will also be live on the British Speedway network as well on Friday evening. 7:30 tapes up. BSN's coverage will start at 7. We've also got Championship action at Ashfield on Friday when the Glasgow Tigers take on the Birmingham Brummies, again at 7:30. And Jubilee League action, it's a crucial one for the Redcar Bears. They need to get something from this one. Redcar against Scunthorpe, the return of last week's clash at the Eddie Wright Raceway back at the Echo Arena, and that's on Friday night, again 7:30 start time. And we've got some National Development League action as well. Bellevue Colts taking on the Kent Royals at 7:30. And we've also got the British Youth Championship Round 5. The 125 and 150 cc's are going to be in action there on Friday night. Elsewhere, Saturday, Armadale Devils taking on the Plymouth Centurions in the NDL at 2:30. And then also on Saturday at Shieldfield Park, Berwick Bandits taking on the Plymouth Gladiators. 6:30 the start time for that one. That's because there's also a Berwick Bullets match in the NDL. The Plymouth Centurions having a double bubble that day because they're taking on Berwick after the main championship meeting. Leicester Lions taking on the Scunthorpe Scorpions in the Championship Jubilee League Northern, so you fancy the Northern section will be all sorted out this weekend. Nothing on Sunday. Then on Monday, all 6 Premiership teams are in action. It's the Wolverhampton Wolves versus the Peterborough Panthers, Bellevue Aces versus the Ipswich Witches, and the Sheffield Tigers versus the Kings Lynn Stars. And then on Tuesday next week, Plymouth Centurions taking on the Berwick Bullets in the National Development League. Wednesday next week, Oxford Chargers versus the Bellevue Colts, the Poole Pirates versus the Plymouth Gladiators in the Jubilee League Southern, and the Birmingham Brummies versus the Berwick Bandits in the Championship. And then you don't need me to tell you, there's only one day then, which is Ipswich versus Kings Lynn in the Premiership, and then it'll be the Championship pairs at Oxford on the Friday and the British Grand Prix on the Saturday, the 13th of August. We're nearly there at the big one, but we'll have more about those fixtures, I'm sure, next week here on No Breaks, No Fear. Before we go, just a shout to a guy called John Curtis, and I mentioned this last week. He's doing a walk for the Ben Fund, and I've got some details here for you, and it's something to watch out for. We'll actually have the man in question on with us next week, but John Curtis is going to be walking from Foxhall Stadium in Ipswich to the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. He starts this week, the 4th of August. He's going to get there on the 12th, the day before the Grand Prix. 264 miles, 30 miles a day. We're going to check in with him next week en route to see how he's getting on. But you can support him if you search Walk to Cardiff 2022 on social media, and look out for the Just Giving page as well. Walk to Cardiff 2022. You can support John, who's doing that for the Speedway Riders Ben Fund. My thanks to everybody who's joined us in this episode, namely Rob Godfrey, and to Mark Lemon as well, and also to Ryan Guest for doing the hard work in getting them to be part of it as well. We're back with a usual episode, a full week of Speedway this next week or so. So we'll bring you some more interviews and stuff next week. And of course, we'll be looking ahead to the Championship pairs and the British Grand Prix. What else can I say? That'll be next week on No Breaks, No Fear. Have a great week.
No Breaks, No Fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.